Hi there, my name is Jakob and I'm an environment artist for QUIXEL at Epic Games. This is the third video of our small tutorial series on our Roman-inspired fantasy environment, in which we'll be going over why I chose to use ray-traced lighting, possible solutions and considerations for asset blending, as well as going over the general topic of technical adaptation and why it is important to know more than one way of achieving a specific goal. If this is the first video of this series you're watching, I'd highly recommend checking out the previous two tutorials in which I cover my process from idea to finished environment, as well as covering asset repurposing and remixing of Megascan's content. As always, without any further ado, let's jump in. Unreal Engine 4 offers a plethora of approaches when it comes to lighting your scene. You have your vanilla rasterization method that encompasses contact shadows and distance field shadows. You can spice up your screen space ambient occlusion with distance field AO and use light propagation volumes, screen space global illumination or baked GI to achieve nice bounce lighting. However, almost all of these approaches are, at least to an extent, a fake or an approximation. With RTX, we can finally get even closer to real light behavior, enhancing our scenes with perfectly directable shadows, gorgeous reflections and wonderful AO. Even though it is quite taxing on your hardware, I decided to utilize ray-traced ambient occlusion, ray-traced reflections, and ray-traced shadows on my directional light, as well as ray-traced skylight shadows. I played around with pretty much all lighting solutions available to me and just came to love the look and feel that RTX offered. While ray tracing is still a bit experimental as of now, which may result in a few technical hiccups, it will only get even more stable, performant and feature-rich down the road. To achieve nice looking blending between my sandy landscape and ground models such as rocks or cliffs or stones, I had to choose between a few technical approaches. If you're not using ray tracing, a great way of blending assets is a dither temporal AA or pixel depth offset blend. While it only really fades out objects rather than actually blending them together, it is a great technique for quick results. I could have also used a distance to nearest surface blend, but in this case I decided to go ahead and use one of the latest features added to Unreal Engine 4, runtime virtual textures. RVTs are a fantastic and highly performed way of storing material data that allows you to, in essence, specify for instance a landscape area to be captured as a top-down interactive projection, storing different material properties. Exposing these parameters allows you to simultaneously write to and read from such an RVT. What this really means is that you can write your landscape material into your RVT volume and read that information back to use it in your asset material, blending between the asset's unique textures and the landscape material information wherever assets come in contact with your landscape. Not only does this approach look fantastic, it is also highly performant and updates in real time. So once this system is set up, it is a breeze to work with, allowing us to give the Megascan's assets a highly sophisticated blend that just really further enhances their appearances in Engine. We do have a detailed blog post and comparison of all three mentioned blending methods on our website, and I made sure to put a link to this breakdown in the description of this video. While I'm not covering the setup in detail, the entire project is available on the Unreal Engine marketplace for you to download and dive into. I would again highly encourage you to open this up yourself and just go through the material setup at your own pace. That way you'll be able to properly dive into how exactly I've decided to set up my material framework for this environment. Now, let's demonstrate the artistic power of using ray tracing and runtime virtual texturing along with the principles of conceptual approach that I touched on in my last two videos of this small tutorial series. Just as with the actual environment, I started off creating a small area of interest using only rastered lighting, no ambient occlusion and barely any post-processing. In this case, I used both the original instance burner scan and the batched together lantern that I derived from that instance burner scan. The landscape around it seems a bit flat, so I take a few rocky 3D assemblies to create more natural shapes and texture variation. Notice that we're not using any blending at all. Even though the shapes are good, the transition feels quite harsh and unnatural. Now, let's just stick another huge column into the scene to keep with our Romanesque theme, and just as before, we really only use a detail normal map to give it a bit more pop. After further tweaking my ground scatter and my basic ferns in the background, it is finally time to give this scene polish. You'll notice how much more organic everything starts to feel as soon as I enable my RVT landscape blending. All of my rock scatter now looks like it is part of the ground. Let's see how this scene looks with ray-traced lighting. Immediately it feels way moodier and intimate, ray-traced reflections showing up beautifully. We can instill even more contrast and life to this by just adding a few point lights to light up our incense burners. With RTX I have full control of the light's appearance, which really lets me opt for smoother, blurry, more indirect shadows. While the groundwork is there, it still feels a bit sterile. So, using just a handful of ivy, climbervine and weed scans from the Megascans library, I'm able to make this small spot feel a lot more organic and lived in, just really trying to tell the tale of time. As mentioned in the previous tutorial, let's use a Roman fresco detail to add the coherent look of cracked red paint to our columns. This will tie in nicely with the rest of my environment, adding that extra bit of weathering and customization. A bit of smoke for movement, and within a few minutes I have another nicely set-dressed area added to my environment. This might need some further polish to make it go that extra mile, but for now, let's just check what difference RTX versus vanilla lighting really made in this scene. Keep in mind, all of this is real time, allowing me to see exactly what my scene looks like. I do not need to wait for baking out light maps, and I don't need to wait 2 hours until my frame is rendered. This is actually the real creative power of using the Megascans ecosystem and Unreal Engine 4 in conjunction. Knowing your way around multiple ways of achieving the same goal in your engine of choice will really allow you to make decisions on the fly, solving possible limitations by just tailoring your approach to the systems you're already using. You could have approached the lighting, the blending of assets, even the entire scene setup quite differently and still get similar results. Each method here has its own pros and cons. You could also mix and mash approaches, create different ones for certain areas of your map, just to really adjust technicalities of different sections of your environment, tweaking values to create the best possible visuals for each shot. Now, thank you all so much for sticking around again. I really hope you all enjoyed it. If you have any thoughts or questions, feel free to add them to the comments of this video, and as always, I can't wait to see you in the next one.